So by the end of this video, you will know the 13 big mistakes that keep Etsy shops from actually making sales. Hello, my name is Steph and I've been selling on Etsy full-time since 2016. But if you've already subscribed to my channel, then you would already know that. Let's get into the tips. Let's get into them. So my big mistake number one is lack of products. Now, Etsy, it is a search-based platform, so people are going there to search for gifts, search for all the things. I mean, there are some really weird searches that come up on Etsy. The more products that you have, the more likely you will be able to rank for any of the keywords that you have written on the product tags or in the title or even in the description if you want to rank on Google. Now, the more products that you have, the better chance that you have of being found for any one of the searches. That doesn't mean that you have to go and spend hundreds of pounds on supplies and spend the next 2 years of your life making hundreds and hundreds of products every week. But what it does mean is that you might have to think of some creative ways to come up with some new products to make out of the supplies that you already have to hand. This could mean things like gift sets, it could mean bundles, it could even mean just literally making a slight variation on a listing that you already have. Now this could be things like keywords, it could be things like the colour, the options that the customer has, anything that you can do that means you create another listing that's a little bit different than the first one. Tip number two is to actually use the tools that Etsy gives you. When you open up a shop, they supply you with the handbook, they give you the Etsy search bar, they give you the forums. Now, the forums have a bit of a love-hate relationship with them because there are so many trolls in there, there are so many negative posts in there, and as you'll see later on, one of my big tips is your mindset. So, my advice would be to stay away from the posts that are just, my sales are slow, Etsy is broken, just all of the negative posts. But if you're looking for educational content, that is probably a good place to go apart from the Etsy handbook. The bright side of the Etsy handbook is the fact that that is information direct from Etsy. So if you've ever stumbled across a blog post and you're not actually quite sure whether the information in there is correct or not, rather than doing your own testing, it might just be good to go and reference the Etsy handbook first and see if they say anything in there. So the most recent example of this is the free shipping Fiasco. Now I'll do a video on this at some point, but Etsy did say that they are giving a slight bump to shops that offer free shipping. Now whether that's right or wrong, it's not really for anyone to say. At the end of the day, Etsy is Etsy and it's their platform. There are lots of people that are saying that actually the free shipping has hindered their sales, but there are others that are saying it's helped. And often when you're trying to look for this topic on Google, you can get quite confused and overwhelmed with the information that they give you. So my advice would be to have a look at the Etsy handbook itself, because that's information that they give you, and test. It's like a little hidden tip, number 2.5. Another good advice for tools to use is use the Etsy search bar. That is the place where your buyers will be searching for things. Now, when you begin to type a search into Etsy, it will automatically populate any popular searches direct from what you're typing in. So if that sounds confusing, it might just be easier just to go on Etsy and just start to type a search. But that is a really good way to actually see what shoppers are searching for and what words they're actually using, because if you're not using the words that the shoppers are using, you might not be found. And going on to SEO, point 3, you have to make sure that your SEO is on point, because again, if you're making silly blunders, silly mistakes, then you might not be found. And it's a real shame to see that some of you out there have fantastic products, fantastic shops, fantastic branding, fantastic photos, everything is on point, but you're not quite sure when it comes to SEO. I will do a video on this at some point. I am not an SEO expert, but I have been able to get thousands of views every month for the last 3 to 4 years. So hopefully I've learned a few things along the way that I can pass on to you guys. Now, my top tips for this is to, again, use the Etsy search bar. You can also use Google, you can also use Pinterest, which is a fantastic place to find keywords, and make sure that you are actually typing in a phrase that the customer is going to search for. So don't just put random keywords like, for example, silver necklace baby 16-inch, because no one is actually typing in that phrase to search for what you have. Now, if you think that your keywords are on point and you're accurately describing what you have, another thing to do would be to actually think about how shoppers would find your item. So for example, if it's a silver necklace, that could be a birthday gift, it could be a Mother's Day gift, it could be a Christmas gift, it could be a graduation gift. Your job is to essentially bring your product to the top of the buyer's attention when they don't know they're looking for it. So again, if you're selling a key necklace, that could be used for a 21st birthday gift, but the customer won't probably be typing in key necklace. Hopefully that makes sense, but I just feel like you need to really put yourself in the buyer's mindset, and you need to sort of think about what they would search for. Tip number 4 is your photos. If your photos are not on point, people will not click on your product. Etsy, at the end of the day, again, it is a search-based platform. So if you're typing in handmade soap, pretend this is a phone, you're literally scrolling through, and if your photos don't catch their attention, i.e. if they're boring, if they're too dark, if they're blurry, if the background is too distracting, they might just literally skim right past you. And if they are clicking on you, you have to make sure that your photographs accurately represent what it is that the buyer will be getting. You don't need fancy equipment to do this. Most smartphones have fantastic cameras. The mistake that most people make is lighting. You need very, very, very good lighting. You need to be sat in front of a bright window and essentially reflecting the light back onto the piece. There are so many really good YouTube videos out there, and you can go on Udemy, UDEMY, to really come up with some really cheap courses that can actually teach you how to take professional looking photographs on your smartphone. So really there's no excuse for having bad photographs. We're all walking around with this fantastic camera in our pockets or in our handbags or in your man bag, who knows. Another point stemming off from the photographs is make sure that you use all 10 photo slots. Now, I have read somewhere before, and I swear it used to be in the Etsy handbook, that the more photos you have, the higher your listing will be ranked. I can't find this. I've looked and I can't find it right now as of recording this, but even so, you will have a higher conversion rate on your listing if people can see all the angles of what you have to sell or the product that you've made. So if you're running out of ideas, this could mean the front of the item, obviously, the back of the item, the sides, a modelled shot, maybe it's sort of in the wild, if you like, so kind of staged in a nicely staged shot that would attract your target market, or maybe a sizing chart, previous reviews. You don't have to fill up the photo slots with actual photos of the item. You can utilize those slots for a lot of different things, and I can do a separate video on this at a later date. Tip number 5 is, if you're going into the forums or if you're going into Facebook groups or anything like that, and you see that someone has posted something that has worked for them, especially when it comes to SEO, don't go and change all of your listings straight off the bat. And especially, please, I beg you, don't touch your best sellers. Etsy likes something about that listing. There's no way for you to know exactly what they like, but if you go and change it, you will then not rank. And I've made this mistake before. I had a necklace listing that was making me hundreds and hundreds of pounds every week, and I accidentally changed it, and that was just completely gone. Literally within an hour, my views were gone, my revenue was gone, and needless to say, I beat myself up about that for such a long time. But at the end of the day, we're all learning, we all make mistakes, and I'm here to try and help you or stop you from making some of those mistakes if I can. What I would say is to test your own theories. Now, a great example of this was when Etsy came out and said about the shorter title length. I've always been one that if they give me all of that space, I'm going to use all of that space. So I tested. What I did is that I copied. So when you make a listing, you go into the top right hand corner and there's a little drop down menu and you can select the copy option, so it copies the listing into a new one, and you can change things there. Don't touch your original listing, especially if it sells really, really well. But definitely copy it, make one change so you can measure it, just make one change. So for example, I reduced the title length, so I made it shorter and I tested it for at least 30 days because that's what the Etsy gods, that's how long it usually takes for your item to be ranked in the first place. Now, in the case of the one that I did, it didn't really work, and I'm glad that I tested it because at least I know what works for my shop. Everyone's shops is different, everybody sells different products, literally there are so many variables in every shop that it's just best if you test things yourself and not take what someone else has said as read or as fact. And that's including me. If you hear anything that I say and you think, that's a good idea, make sure that you test it, because I may say it and it may work for my shop, but it might not work for yours. Tip number 6 is renew and refresh your listings. First point of this, renewing, I don't think it's no longer a thing that you can do, i.e. you can't just renew a listing and expect it to bump up to page 1. That used to work a couple of years ago. I was guilty of this. I used to just renew a listing 3 or 4 times a day, especially if it was one that sold really, really well, and expect it to sell, and actually it did work. But now Etsy has grown up, or their search algorithm has grown up to be more like Google. The more often that you refresh your listings, the better your shop will effectively be. And a great tip for this would be to, when you make a listing and you're seeing that it's not getting the traction that you hoped, wait for it to expire, and then you have an active ready-made list of listings that you have to then go back in and change. Because there's been so many times where I've planned to go in and change a whole bunch of listings, and then for some reason those listings have begun to sell. So I would say wait the full 4 months and see if you get any traction on your listing within then. If it doesn't and it expires, then you have free reign to completely revamp it, whether that's SEO, photographs, but at the very least change something or try and improve one point or one area of your listing and see if that helps. So that's what I mean about refreshing listings, is that you need to be actively working on your shop. My Etsy shop is a full-time job. I'm in it every single day, changing things, and I think that's been a large factor as to why I've made sales. Tip number 7 is don't shy away from promoted listings. I know they can be a pain, and I know that so many people have said that they've lost money on them and they don't know how they work and they don't work for their shop. What I would say to that is to research and research and research and research and test. For me, the first year of my Etsy shop, promoted listings didn't really work, but that was mainly because I didn't understand the cost per click, the daily budget. I didn't really understand how they worked. But if you're stuck, I would only turn on promoted listings for a certain amount of listings in your shop, ones that you know perform well, because if these are being bumped up and they convert customers anyway, then there's really nothing to lose if you turn on promoted listings and you bump these up in the search ranking. I would also start out with auto bids. Now, that might be a controversial view, but at least for the first month, start off with auto bids and see how your listings fare, because you can always go back in and reduce the bid cost, so you can customize each item's bid. So now what I've done is I've managed to essentially have a list of listings that rank really, really well. So I know that I can turn off everything else. I can just literally focus on these 40 to 50 listings. I can increase the bid so I can be shown on page 1 every time a customer searches for a tag or a keyword my listing has. Tip number 8 is being naughty and not selling handmade goods or reselling on Etsy. I have appreciation for all types of entrepreneurs, but Etsy is not made for you to resell your goods. It's not made for you to buy things and resell it on Etsy. Over the last few years, I have seen an increase in this. Go and read the Etsy handbook. I'm not entirely sure what it says now, but you have to make sure that you're not in breach of any of Etsy's policies. They can shut your shop down with no notice at all, and especially if you're breaking the rules, I just wouldn't do it. Like, it's not worth it. If you're going to spend this time building up your shop and building up an actual business on the foundation and on the basis that you're selling things that are in breach of their policies, you are setting your business up to fail, especially if you are just selling on Etsy. 99.9% of you out there are true crafters and you have some creative aspect or some input in the creative process of your products. And that's fine. People have opinions on whether it should be truly handmade, i.e. you buy the wool, you knit the scarf, or whether you can use like Kercut, I'm not entirely sure how to say it, and sort of stick things on ready-made products. It's not for me or anybody else to judge. As long as you're not in breach of Etsy's terms or Etsy's policies, then in my opinion, you should be good to go. Tip number 9 is drive your own traffic. Honestly, don't rely on the Etsy search to bring in organic traffic to you. Sometimes when they're doing testing, which recently they're testing a lot of stuff, it can effectively break the search for a good couple of hours or two. And if you're literally just relying on Etsy search to bring you in traffic, you can lose a lot of sales, especially if you're a full-time seller like me. If I relied purely on the Etsy search, there would be days where I would make nothing at all. Etsy is allowed to do this. It is their platform. So my advice to you would be to take control and effectively be able to drive your own traffic. Social media is a fantastic way to do this. I personally use Facebook, Instagram and Pinterest as my main 3. I also use Twitter as well, not as much. I don't feel as if it fits in with my whole target market, but as long as you're using social media in the right way and you're selling your brand story and you are driving really targeted traffic to your Etsy shop, you should be fine. And that's regardless if Etsy are doing testing or anything like that. So just make sure that you take control of your Etsy shop and you can drive your own traffic, and yeah, you should be fine. Tip number 10 is not pricing correctly. Now, I did speak about this in a different video. Essentially, you have to do your research beforehand, because pricing too low, now a lot of people think that, you know, they're in the eBay mindset, the Amazon mindset. You don't have to compete on price. You don't have to undercut every seller that's on Etsy. But as long as you do your research on the kind of pricing that your market can actually withstand, you should be fine. But please, please, please do not undervalue yourself. Do not price low. If you're building a business and you're building a brand, you can't sustain yourself on outdoing or undercutting every single seller out there, because it just will not work. On the same token, is not pricing too high. If you're making a handmade candle and you want to charge £500, well, you might not be selling as many as you'd hoped on Etsy. But if you can totally justify the cost and you've built a fantastic brand and you have a niche market that loves your candles, then by all means give it a go. But you just have to make sure that you do your research beforehand and essentially come up with what other people price and where yours will slot into those two high points and low points, if that makes sense. I'll link the other video above in the cards or below, just so you know what I mean. Tip number 11. I liked how I did that. So tip number 11 is not taking time and planning out your next move on Etsy. I'm guilty of this and it's something that I have to work on, but as I say, do as I say and not as I do. Especially when you're launching products. I've seen this work for so many other sellers. I'm impatient. I just want to get my products out there as soon as I can, but what I would say is if you have a small audience, even if it's 10 really engaged people that you know buy from you, that love everything that you do, before you launch, build a bit of a hype. So, for example, let's say you're going to launch a glow-in-the-dark blueberry scented candle. That's completely random. Sorry about my dog barking, by the way. So let's say you're going to launch this candle. Now, my advice to you would be to make sure that you build hype beforehand. Do sneak peeks on social media, do polls, do Instagram stories, and just generally make sure that people are aware that something really, really awesome is coming, and put a date in there, maybe put a discount code in there. And when you launch, you have to build immense hype. And essentially, as long as you have a targeted audience and that your product is in line with that, you should be good to go. You should be good to make sales. But what I mean is you have to plan out your next move on Etsy, and that's not to just do what I do and just fling stuff out there, because that's really naughty. Bad stuff. Tip number 12 is not writing your descriptions to sell, just literally using them to say, hey, this is a candle, it burns for 40 hours, and yeah, here's my social media, buy it please. Sorry to say, but that's not going to sell your product. You have to build hype in your description. Now, I know a lot of people don't read the descriptions, and I can hear so many of you out there going, but they don't read it, what's the point? But there are some people who read it, and you have to draw your customer in. You have to capture emotions with it. You have to give them all the feels. You have to make them, by the end of it, think, I need this candle, I'm going to buy it right now. And believe it or not, this can be done with your description. There are so many good copywriting YouTube videos out there, Udemy courses. Just go and find one that suits you. And if you're more of a book reader, Words That Sell, I can't remember the author, but Words That Sell and Phrases That Sell are two books that I use all the time, because they're so handy when you have a creative writing block and you just don't know what to say. Pick them up, you can get them secondhand online really, really cheap, and they are amazing for writing descriptions. What you have to do is you have to make sure that your descriptions aren't boring, they aren't too long. The places to list your frequently asked questions, your shipping policies, and your shop policies in general is not in your description, but is in those shop areas that they give you. I've been guilty of this before, where I've had a description that was a scroll. Literally, it would take you about 10 minutes to read it. People never read it. Honestly, I would put my shipping times in there, and I'd always get questions as to how long it would take to ship. So that just goes to show that within the first 2 or 3 scrolls, I don't think people genuinely read past that. So you have to make sure that all of your best stuff, if you like, or your best words or phrases that you're using to sell is in the top part of the description. So by the time they've scrolled 2 or 3 goes, I'm pretending that I'm on a phone here, that they are primed to buy, they are hungry for your product, and that will ensure that your product sells. The last tip number 13 is your mindset. You're not starting a hobby on Etsy, or you could be, but my bet is to say that if you're here and you're watching me now, that you're wanting to start it as a serious business. Serious businesses, they set goals, they know exactly what they want, and my advice to you would be to make some kind of dream board. That could be one, I mean, I've got one out there. It's in a place that I see it every single day. You can make one on Pinterest, you can put it on your desktop, but you have to know a goal. So whether that's amount of sales per month, per day, per year, you have to essentially know what you're wanting out of your Etsy shop and what you're wanting out of yourself. Because my bet is that you saw one day that there was this thing called Etsy, or you started making these candles or scarves, and your family members said to you, oh, that's amazing, you should sell those, and then they mentioned Etsy. If you're just throwing your shop out there and you're not entirely sure what your intention for your shop is, then that's the quickest way to just kind of slump and get a bit lazy with it, really. So for me, for example, when I first started my Etsy shop, I wanted it to be full-time. I wanted to build a business for me that could support me And essentially that's exactly what I did. For the first year that my Etsy shop was up, my tunnel vision, absolute goal was to go full-time with my business. And I'm so glad that I set that goal, because when I finally reached it in April 2016, it was the best feeling ever, and I wouldn't deprive that of anybody. I would always want you to set goals. And whether it's a small goal, whether it's to reach 100 sales by the end of the year, at the very least you've got some kind of goal in place and it's set in your mind. So every time you're thinking about your shop, you're working on your shop, everything that you do should be in service of that goal, if that makes sense. Another thing as well is your mindset. And this goes alongside with making the goals, setting the goals, is that if you don't truly believe that you can be a handmade seller full-time on Etsy, then you probably won't be. It goes along with the saying of what you think about, you bring about, or and so it is, or essentially what you think you will create. I'm living proof here to say that you absolutely can make a full-time income on Etsy. I quit my job that I didn't like to do this, and I've learned every single day. I've been in the trenches every single day. It's hard work, but I'm here to say that you can absolutely do it. And if you want some more tips on how to do it, I'll be doing lots more videos about Etsy, about handmade online in general. And yeah, I'm just essentially here to help you. So if you have any questions or anything at all, put them in the comments below, and either myself or another one of the community here will lend you a hand. So thanks for watching my video, subscribe, stay to the end for some bloopers, because there are a lot, there are always a lot. At the end of every single one of my videos, there's always bloopers and funny things to lighten your day. So yeah, please subscribe, please share, please like, please comment, and just have a fantastic day, and I hope these tips helped you. Bye! Now and that's regardless, that is not going to sell your candle. I'm sorry to say, but you have to remember what you're going to say.